Hey artist humans! Today's video I'll be showing you how to draw a tree using ink at the request of my dear niece Emily. This is for you, Em! My dear sweet niece Emily was recently in a hit and run on her bike and is currently in recovery and has asked that I do a tutorial for her to help her pass the time. If you'd like to support Emily, please click the link I provided to her GoFundMe account. That would be awesome. She's an amazing artist herself and would appreciate your support. So, where do you start when drawing a tree? First thing is pick a tree, use a reference. You'll learn more about drawing if you can start with a reference. And then eventually you'll be able to draw from memory really well. So I picked a tree that my daughter loves to climb in the playground next door. Maybe you have a favorite species of tree. Maybe there's a particular tree you like to sit under. If you can't get out in the woods like my dear Emily can't right now, then use a photograph. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and would love to see your finished trees on the Facebook page. Art with Amira would be awesome. So Emily, please share your final drawing and get well soon. I love you. So the materials you'll need, I do like to start with a pencil just to get some of the basic proportion down, an eraser, and your ink materials of choice. I'm using Copic markers. Micron pens work great, Sharpies work great, dipping pens work great. And then I'm using a piece of paper from my sketchbook, but you could use computer paper if you're on a budget, or watercolor paper can be cool. Then you can really let ink flow if you're using dipping ink. So the steps I take to draw a tree are the same steps I would take to draw anything. So once you follow these techniques, they kind of apply to anything you'd like to draw. So the first thing I usually start with is proportion and the central axis of a form. So this tree is like a standing figure, and you can see that it is at an angle. This tree is in beautiful Hood River, Oregon, which has a lot of wind. So this tree has been pummeled a lot. So we're going to try and get the energy of that motion in this drawing. I think that's really important. So I'm going to take, first of all, get the axis angle of the tree. I'm just setting it on there and moving over here. So I took this photo and then printed it in black and white. It's easier to deal with light and shadow if you're not distracted by color, if you're only going to be doing a black and white drawing. So I'm going to do it exactly to scale, which is super easy. You can just go and measure something and take it right over to the side. If you're going to be working from a small photo and blowing it up big, then you would do what's called grabbing a basic unit and measuring everything else against that. So if this were your basic unit, you would count how many of these tall the whole tree is. So 1, 2, 3, 4 of those. So if you were drawing it smaller, you would just decide how big that bottom part were going to be and count 4 to get the top of the tree. But I'm going to do it exactly to scale for our purposes. So I'm going to mark that there are 4 of those tall. And that gives me the general direction that the tree is going in. And then look for any other major areas that you want to map. This is pretty important here where it starts to branch out. I'm going to find that central axis angle. It comes out of this point. And you can think of angles as hands on a clock. So if you had a clock and you had all of your times on there, 1, 2, 3, that can kind of help you make sure you're matching it. So this would be like at 1 o'clock and make sure you matched it over here. So I'm going to check this angle now, and that is maybe an 11 o'clock angle. Looks like I got it right. And then I'm going to measure this little branch here where it splits and see how much of the whole trunk it takes up, and it's about 1/3 of the trunk, so that's how I know how far back to go. And I've got this angle here. I'm just doing a central axis line. I'm not drawing an outside edge. I'm just, if you had a spine going up the center of each of these branches telling you what direction it was going in, that's what you're doing. So I'm getting the trunk first, not worried about leaves right now. And some proportion I just kind of intuit, but I'm going to get the major parts measured. You can also look at the shape of the space to give you an idea of the angle of things. So I'm going to figure out now how far up the branch splits again. It's right about there. I've got another branch here. Check that angle. Angle matching, one of my favorite drawing skills. And I'm starting in pencil just because this is all about mapping. You can do this in pen. It can be kind of cool to have all your measurements underneath the drawing. That can be kind of pretty. So just getting the general info. Yeah. It's important to sing to your art. Then it feels loved. Okay, this is really tilting. Thank you, Hood River Wind. So I'm going to really make sure that the general angle of that branch is tilting a lot. And if you look at that turn, it lines up with the edge of the trunk. Just getting the general info. And another thing you do is do sighting, where you find the end of a point and you drop it down and figure out how far over it is from there. So if I do that, then I know if I got this far enough. It looks pretty good. So much information, what am I going to do? I'm just going to get general edges now, the outer edges around the tree. And as I'm drawing, I'm looking at the shape of the contour edge here. You can freehand your proportion if you want, and then just check it after you draw. If you want, like I freehanded that, now I'm just going to check it. Looks a little high up, so I'm going to drop that puppy down. Check the width. Getting the general angle there. I'm going to check this angle. It's a little more straight than I've got there. So important thing to look at with trees, usually when I see people make up trees from their head, they'll have the trunk all the same thickness. That would be it'd be really hard for the tree to support itself if that were true. Thicker at the base is going to help. So the base is wider and angles in, and that's a support structure. Get that feeling of growth. I love trees. If you've never seen my other art, there's a link in my bio, but trees are my #1 favorite thing to draw in the world. Or paint, actually. So I'm super happy to do this for you, Emma Lou. I got general info there. Lots going on up here. Can I just say it's a little tricky to draw and talk at the same time, so sometimes I go silent because I'm concentrating. It's fun to look to like where the branch attaches. So branches actually grow in a spiral up the tree, so it can be fun to find evidence of that. And so I can kind of see that this actually attaches down here, and then this one grows off to the side, and then the next one is coming around the other side. So all of that can help your tree really feel like it's growing, it's in space, you're getting the energy of its upward motion. Alright, I'm feeling like I'm doing too much in pencil now, so I'm going to go to ink and check my pen. I always check it off to the side. Oh, that's nice. Okay, so I'm going to just get the trunk is the foundation of this drawing, or like where all the branches, everything's attached to that. So I like to start with the foundation, have that down, just like we started with the axis marks. I'm trying to get the tension, not just go and outline like it's a pencil. The really nice thing about ink is you can change the pressure and get thick to thin lines. So I'm trying to let it be wispy in places, solid, just depending on the feel. That part of the branch, what's the tension? There seems to me like there's tension where the branch is turning, and then it's a little softer where it isn't. So that's how I tend to focus. I'm not really ending the branches, I'm leaving it kind of open-ended. And then keep going here. Kind of skipping a little bit because there's some branches there. Okay, now the branch is kind of getting super thin there, so I'm not really drawing the other side anymore. And there's so much detail in this tree, you kind of have to make some decisions about what is important and what do you need to not worry about. So I think the structure of the trunk is really important. And looking for a nuance in that line so it doesn't just look like a boring straight line, because it's not what's happening in that tree, right? It's Pretty interesting edge. It's an organic being, not a robot. And if you can't see it, don't draw it. So I could imagine that trunk going there, but I want to avoid putting it in there because I can't really see it. Just trying to draw what I see. That's super cool. This tiny little wisp up here is gorgeous. This little whip-like marks. I'm trying to match the energy of that line. It's not a big chunky line. It's super wispy. The very end of the branch is just kind of wisping out in space. So my line quality is matching that. I always do what's called the squint test to see if I've missed any major branches. Pretty good. Okay, now we have so much information here. What are we going to do? So what I like to do is start with a value scale, and I think I'll do a demo for that and record it and have that in a separate video. But you want to think about how to shade super black blacks, dark gray, medium gray, light gray, and white. So you want to kind of look for those areas. So what I'm going to do right now is just gently outline areas that I think are the purest black, just to kind of give me an idea of where to put the most buildup. So I can see a really big dark area right here. And I'm trying to make my marks match the feeling of the tree. So there's kind of a dark area. Lots of dark shapes right here. I'm looking at the general shape of the group of leaves rather than worrying about every single leaf, but trying to get the feel of like the direction things are going in. So lots of little chunks here and there. Kind of squint and look for the general shape. Very lightly sketching it. This tree is like most of the growth is happening to the right. Give myself a general feel for where things will be. I'm trying to, if you squint your eyes and you look at this, you see this very fluttery left to right motion. And every tree will be different. So this one is showing evidence of being in the wind, so there's going to be a lot of motion in the way the leaves are laid out, whereas maybe a Douglas fir might have a very rigid central outward motion. Apologize for all the background noise. I'm not sure what that sound is. I do have a playground next to my house, just saying. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of shading around the trunk where these little middle grays are. And when I shade with ink, I start at any edge that is a sharp, hard edge and I shade away from it. And I try and go with the form, so we know this is kind of a curved branch here. So I'm going to shade with the form and change direction slightly. It's a series of parallel marks. As I know the branches change direction, I'm changing the direction of my marks. There's these cute little wispy shadows of the leaves in here. I try to be super observant in light and shadow. There's a little reflected light in that shadow, so I'm not letting it be super dark right at the edge. And you can see the leaf patterns are curving around the branch. So I'm just basically looking at this entire area and I see it all as very solid black. But as I create my marks, I'm trying again to go with the direction that the leaves are growing in, just to give it that life force energy. Feeling like this is a living thing. I'm just looking the shape of the mass. You could also look at it as negative space, look at the space around it, and just build up your marks. So that's for a very dark area. And there are little marks here, and I'm just kind of, rather than outlining each leaf, I'm looking at them as groups, clumps, little shapes. I'm feeling the energy kind of change in direction, so I'm changing my marks to show the energy of that. And I can just kind of suggest the outer shape of leaves. And as I get to areas that have lighter gray clumps of leaves, I'm just not pushing down and layering as much. I blur my eyes a lot when I'm doing this because you're trying to generalize something that's super busy, so I'll kind of let my eyes go hazy and just keep looking back and forth. And don't worry about super precise marks, but rather getting the energy and flow of those leaves as a group. And then darken as we see anywhere. You can come back at the very end and pull out some areas of detail. As you go. So rather than watching me draw 17,000 leaves in real time, I'm going to time lapse the rest of this shading. And then I will go back to real time when I start pulling out some areas of detail. One thing you might want to do before you get too much further is look for areas that have bright bits of light. And just be aware that you're going to be shading around those little areas, so you may want to outline just a few of those little spots of light, getting the shapes to really show that energy of the wind that's happening so much. So we can just outline light areas because we're not drawing with white, just to remind us to shade around it. And then we'll come back to that area. So in the time lapse, I will shade behind those areas of light. Just kind of get a few of those. So this is a general finished tree. How do you know when it's finished? That's going to need to be up to you and your own intuition. You may like it less developed. You may like your final drawing less developed, more expressionistic. You may want more detail than I added. I did take notes while I was drawing on some things that I tend to look for as I'm working and things that are happening while I'm working. So I blurred my eyes through much of it so that I was looking at general shapes and I wasn't so overwhelmed by individual tiny leaves. I kept my marks loose and looked back and forth a lot. So I was looking here more than here and keeping my eye moving with my hand. Focused on areas of light and dark. So you can see these big chunks of dark, and I'd squint or blur and see if I captured the major areas of dark and light. The squint test is super helpful. If you can't figure out how to see light and dark, squint and the darks and lights will pop out at you. And then I added details in the edges rather than the central area. So I looked in outer areas here, and there you can see individual leaves really clearly. And if I can't see a branch, I don't do it. Just kind of look for general mark making you can do to imply leaves. Again, the level of detail is up to you. Your feeling about the drawing. I did add a little shadow over here. I tend to do left to right marks to make it feel like the ground plane. You do what feels good to you. If I were going to really focus on this drawing, I would start building up the darks and lights in the background. For our purposes today, for my dear Emmylou, this is the basic image of a tree. So you can use the same techniques with any type of tree. Look at the axis lines. The direction leaves are moving, blur your eyes, get general, and then move into detail. Lights and darks are super important. Look for extreme darks, medium grays, light grays, little spots of pure white popping through. So I really enjoyed drawing this for you, Emily, and other artist humans. Hope you enjoy drawing trees. If you would like a demo, a one lesson demo, please reply in the comments, and I'd be happy to do some demos for you, my beautiful viewers, my little artist humans. So if you enjoyed this video, please click like, subscribe, share, all those kind things you can do for YouTubers. And happy art making!